All right, let's get ready for the last video of Chapter 6, the Constitution of 1787. There is going to be a lot of information on this slide, and I am not going to read through all of it because hopefully as you read through it, it will remind you of all of the fun things you learned in government class last year. Just to highlight a few things, the number one thing that you should focus on when it comes to learning about the Constitution is how it addressed the major weaknesses of the Articles. So, for instance, obviously the Articles of Confederation had a very weak national government. The new Constitution is going to have a stronger national government. The Articles of Confederation had issues with representation and fairness, and the Constitution is going to address that in several different ways. And so just simple things like that, make sure that as you're learning about, reading about the new Constitution, move my face here, that you keep those things in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is to think about how this new Constitution would have impacted different people in America. So, for instance, does this Constitution favor wealthy people? Does it favor white people? Does it favor men? Things like that are really important to keep in mind because those are things that you're often asked about on the AP exam. A couple of things at the bottom of the slide there, one that's being covered up by the Screencastify graphic that I can't remove, is to keep in mind that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, which is the Supremacy Clause. That'll come up here in the next chapter, and so will the Necessary and Proper Clause, which is also known as the Elastic Clause, which is used to expand the power of the national government, or some might say stretch the power of the national government. So lots of stuff on this slide that you'll want to make sure that you read through. If you remember, again, a lot of this is government information, but if you remember from government class, the Constitutional Convention was not a legal meeting. It's not like the Articles of Confederation government called these people together and were like, hey, the article sucks. You should try to figure out a way to make it better. It was really quite the opposite. The Constitutional Convention took place behind closed doors, locked closed doors in the summer in Philadelphia, where it would have been really hot. But once the Constitution was done, it's not like it automatically became the new law of the land. And so the framers had to figure out, okay, how do we make this new Constitution the official law of the land? And so they sent it to the states, where the goal was to get 9 of the 13 states to ratify it. And in that particular process, you see the emergence of really the two, we'll call them the first two political parties in America. They weren't political parties like we would think of them today, but the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And you can see some of the differences there on the slide between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. But the Federalists and Anti-Federalists both spent a significant amount of time publishing literature in newspapers, pamphlets, really at the time doing all they could to get the word out, either supporting the new Constitution or opposing it. The Federalist Papers were written by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, and ultimately they persuaded the vast majority of Americans to support the new Constitution. But some things to keep in mind there at the very bottom of the screen. It says typically people in the back country, so we're talking rural America, the farmers, were anti-Federalists, whereas the Easterners were the Federalists. The major concern from the Anti-Federalists was that the new Constitution didn't have a Bill of Rights. And so the way that the Federalists got the Anti-Federalists to ultimately ratify the new Constitution was to promise a Bill of Rights would be put in immediately as soon as it was ratified, which it was. Um, Ultimately, all 13 states do ratify the new Constitution, and in 1787, by 1788, we, as a country, are electing our first president. So that's the new Constitution. In Chapter 7, we'll see how those political divisions that started over the debate of the Constitution really ultimately form the first two political parties in American history. So thanks for watching, and I'm sorry.